So let me start by offering my condolences to the family of the victims, acknowledging the impact to the Redmond community and the aftermath of this tragic event. Last night around 1:45 a.m., officers responded to the 16700 block of Northeast 89th Street regarding shots fired. Officers were met by a neighbor and the mother of one of the victims and directed them to the home. As officers approached the front of the home, a male later identified as the husband of the victim was seen in a doorway. As officers tried to communicate with him, he collapsed and became unresponsive. Officers evacuated him from the front of the house and realized that he had been shot. CPR was started and he was handed over to paramedics and unfortunately was pronounced dead at the scene. Officers formed a search team and entered the location understanding that there were two other individuals located inside the home. The officers discovered a female deceased from a gunshot wound and a male deceased from an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound in the master bedroom. The Redmond Police Department is familiar with both the victim and suspect in this case because of an active stalking investigation that was occurring. A protection order was obtained by the Redmond City prosecutor, but had yet been served on the suspect because his whereabouts were unknown. The detectives had been in frequent contact with the victim and her family throughout this investigation. The victim initially contacted the Redmond Police Department in December of 2022 because of the actions of the suspect, and again mid-January in 2023 because the actions of the suspect had intensified. The suspect and victim met via a podcast type of chat app platform that was specifically for Farsi-speaking individuals seeking employment in the tech industry. At this time, the Washington State Patrol is assisting Redmond police detectives with processing the scene, and the names of the victim and suspect will be provided by the coroner's office after they take possession of the bodies. And with that, I'll open it up to a few questions.
Tell us more about this man who did this. Is Stalker, crazed fan? I mean, what was kind of the fascination that he had with the wife who lived here?
It's unclear what the fascination was. As I indicated, they met through this chat platform, and that is how contact was initially established.
And was this the chat platform through Twitter? Can you?
It was not Twitter. As I understand it, it was an application called Clubhouse.
His occupation, is it truck driver?
Long-haul truck driver.
And not from this area?
I understand he was from the state of Texas.
If she had sought a restraining order months ago, what was the delay? Why didn't this happen a long time ago?
So the restraining order was sought at the beginning of March as the investigation got to that point. And I would just remind the public that a restraining order is simply a piece of paper that allows officers to take enforcement action should a suspect violate the court order, but a piece of paper does not protect a person when someone is intent on causing them harm.
Along with that, I mean, if someone else is in this situation now and they just hear you say it's just a piece of paper, what is your message to any other stalking victims out there who just heard what you said?
So the message to them is, just in this case, as this victim did, to work closely with investigators to allow us to seek that restraining order so we can take enforcement action should a suspect violate it. But I do not want to create a false sense of security just because a restraining order or a protective order is obtained, that is some type of shield, that it is important for them to report each and every violation of that court order so that we can actually, so that the prosecutor can then actually bring that person forward for justice based upon violating that court order.
So how else can people protect themselves, especially women in this situation?
So in this situation, again, to work closely with your law enforcement partners. In this particular case, as I said, the detectives had been in contact with them. They talked about additional security measures that they could and did take to protect themselves in their home by way of security cameras, etc. So in this case, the victim did everything that they possibly could. Unfortunately, this person, broke into their home and killed her, and it is a tragic event.
What were some of the challenges when trying to contact the suspect in the stalking investigation? What were those barriers since he was mobile?
That those are the exact challenges that we face. That this was an individual who, by virtue of his profession, moved from place to place. So it was difficult to, I'll say, pin him down to a location. It wasn't as though he was local and we had a local address to where we could either do surveillance or find him, serve the protective order, etc. He was in a different state, traveled across the country as part of his employment. So that was the biggest challenge.
Can you talk about the nature of the stalking? I mean, how many calls a day? Was he actually coming to her home? What was happening?
So, as I understand it, in one of the reports, she reported over 100 contacts in a single day. There were instances where the individual did show up at the location previously, bearing gifts. There were items that were, I'll say, items of affection, gifts, etc., that were actually mailed to the victim.
And Chief, can you talk a little bit about, obviously violent crimes in Redmond, fairly rare. Can you talk a little bit about just what went through your mind when you heard the details about this case, especially a case where the family was trying to take the best steps possible to protect themselves? Obviously, it's a case that brought you out here to the scene today.
So again, it's tragic. I had been briefed on the case earlier this week by our investigators, and hearing about it and hearing all the steps that had been taken prior to the briefing and prior to last night, and the advice that had been given to the victim and her family. I am proud of my investigators and the efforts that they undertook, because this was a misdemeanor stalking case, but the investigator, I'll say, had it in her gut that this was more than that, and really tried to do everything possible to keep the victim and her family safe.
Chief, if I'm getting this right, so you heard about this case even before this murder? It was brought to your attention earlier this week before everything happened here?
Correct. As part of our normal operations, I received briefings from my investigators of open and ongoing cases, of which this was one. So I was aware of it on Tuesday before this event occurred last night.
Can you tell us, I mean, obviously this is the absolute worst case scenario when it comes to stalking. We uncovered in the court docs, I guess there was a protection order. There was one time where he threatened to burn himself alive and light the trees on fire. I mean, you've been doing this a while. From your juncture, I mean, this is the worst case scenario.
Absolutely, this is the absolute worst outcome, for a stalking case. This is every victim, every detective, every police chief's worst nightmare.
Can you go over again how the mother did have an encounter with this man? How did she escape? I just broke it up.
So, as I understand it, the suspect broke into the home via a bedroom window, that bedroom being the mother's. She did encounter the suspect. She was aware of what was occurring, and she knew or realized that she needed to get out and get help. So she got out, went to a neighbor's house, and called 911.
Chief, when was the last time we had a homicide here?
As your colleague said, it does not happen very often here in Redmond. I want to say 2021, perhaps.
None last year, though, for sure. 2022.
No.
And you said you believe the suspect had committed misdemeanors before that. Can you walk us through what specific crimes had been committed and what power police have in this case to do anything about it?
So this was deemed to be a misdemeanor stalking case because of the actions of the suspect up to the point of last night. And with that, with misdemeanor cases, those are handled by a city prosecutor as opposed to the King County prosecutor. And just that, it's at the misdemeanor level. So we can we can arrest the person. That's why we sought the protective order. We were, attempting to locate the subject, so he in fact could be arrested and served with that protection order.
What happens now? I know we're waiting on confirmation of your identity. Where does this all leave you and your team?
So again, it leaves us, deeply saddened by the outcome. And at this point, we'll continue working with our partners, both at State Patrol and the Medical Examiner's Office, to finish processing and clear the scene. And then over the course of the weekend, we will work with the mother to ensure that she has the resources and services she needs to move forward at this difficult time in her life, securing her property, etc., and then securing the location.
Chief, can you talk about the red truck that was towed away?
At this point, we believe that may have been the vehicle that the suspect arrived in the area in.
Chief, I know you said that a restraining order is just a document, it's just a piece of if this had not happened and if you had been able to serve that restraining order, would you have been able to arrest this man and put him behind bars?
We would have been able to arrest him. The putting him behind bars part, that would be up to the jail because it is a misdemeanor depending upon, capacity, etc. But by arresting the individual, our goal and our hope would be that they would understand the seriousness of it and that would help to either stop the behavior completely or significantly mitigate it. Last question?
Mine, there's a hearing. There was supposed to be a hearing a week from today, right, on this case. Do I have that right?
I don't know. That would all be contingent upon him being served with a protection
If he
order.
had been served, then
Correct.
I just want to clarify that.
Okay, thank you guys very much.